Social Moral Development, created by Ariel Weider,
Emily DeVille,
Nayeli Hernandez,
Mia Fraga,
and Serenity Gomez. Our mission statement is to seek out reliable and credible information to aid in the learning about the process of adolescent decision-making based on what is morally acceptable in contemporary society.
the theorist our group chose to focus on was Lawrence Kohlberg and his theory of moral development. Lawrence Kohlberg is an American psychologist, and he's most notable for his theory of moral development. He strongly agreed with Piaget's theory, but he wanted to elaborate. So in his theory, there are 3 levels of moral development, and each level is split into 2, and it runs in a fixed order that is linked to the cognitive development as one continues to age. So how he ran this experiment was he wanted children to react to various moral dilemmas. And one of his most famous moral dilemmas is the story of a man whose wife had cancer, and the doctor said there was a new type of medicine, and a local chemist had discovered it. So he went to the chemist, but he could not afford it, and later went back with half the money raised. The chemist would still not let him have it, so later he went back and stole the medicine. So he would have these children react to these dilemmas such as that one, and he believed that the reasoning behind their decisions was a better indicator of moral development than their actual answers. So here is more on the structure of the development. As you can see, level 1 is pre-conventional morality. It's from age 0 to 9. And this stage, morals are shaped by standards of adults. And in those smaller stages, that is essentially the objective of that level. So the first stage would be obedience and punishment. So they followed these morals in order to be an obedient child and avoid punishment. In the second stage, individualism in exchange. The second level is conventional morality, their acceptance of social rules concerning right and wrong. So in stage 3, the objective is to maintain good interpersonal relationships. So by following these social rules about right and wrong, they were able to maintain good relationships. And stage 4 is maintaining the social order, very similar to stage 3. And level 3 is post-conventional morality and understanding of universal ethical principles. And this is the most complex level. And in stage 5, it's social contract and individual rights. In stage 6, and universal principles. And the objective, like I said, is a lot more complex because it is about pretty much an individual's building of their own morals and universal principles based on everything they have learned. And here is an image depicting all the stages. As you can see, here's the pre-conventional level with stage 1 and 2 in the objective, avoiding punishment, aiming a reward. Conventional level in the objectives, a good boy and good girl attitude, essentially an individual wanting to come across as a good person to authority in their life. And stage 4, loyalty to law and order, basically following society's right and wrong based on the law. And the post-conventional level, justice in the spirit of the law and universal principles of ethics. And here's a quote by Lawrence Kohlberg: "Right action tends to be defined in terms of general individual rights and standards that have been critically examined and agreed upon by the whole society."
Okay, the study that I chose to relate to social and moral development is the study of children development in sympathy, guilt, and moral reasoning. In the study of child development, it examines the roles of sympathy, guilt, and moral reasoning and helping and cooperation within 175 children ranging from ages 16 to 18. Caregivers gave an assessment of these children in different tasks that demonstrated sympathy, guilt, and moral reasoning. The research in developmental psychology has a purpose to gain a deeper understanding on how to make children engage in pro-social environments. Recent studies have shown 3 central motives that underline children's tendencies in gaining moral and pro-social behaviors: children's feelings of sympathy for others in anguish, feelings of guilt and excluding others in prosocial duties, and moral reasoning and judgment for these reflect fairness and care. Through the use of these different tasks, the emotional aspects of sympathy, guilt, and moral reasoning correlate with each other to enhance helping, cooperation, and sharing in children. Sympathy emphasizes the negative highlights from the victim and eases or helps the distressed ones. This associates with high levels of cooperation within sympathy. Evidence in the study shows sympathy and helping others associated with preschool and school-age children through facial features and physiological measures of sympathy, although there was only a small measure of guilt being associated with helping others. Guilt involves negative feelings of regret and sadness from the self because it assumes harm has been caused and contravene moral standards. Guilt and sharing can only then be associated together. This is believed to be when a child is in possession of something, it is harder for them to share with another child. Due to guilt, the child is then, quote unquote, forced or motivated to share. Lastly, moral reasoning involves fairness-oriented considerations to why it is important to behave morally, and the self-reflective process entails the ability to distinguish between needs and desires from fairness, justice, and care. Positive association of a child's moral reasoning derives from the cooperation from their mothers. It is shown that moral, oh, sorry, I wasn't, sorry, oh. Okay. It is shown that moral development comes from cognitive development, for it is taught at a young age and internalized as a child grows. High levels of moral reasoning and sympathy are deemed to increase in early childhood developmental stages. And this relates to my career path as a behavioral psychologist and social moral development. As a behavioral psychologist, they help those be reactive to their feelings, to be aware of the differences between sympathy, guilt, and moral reasoning with manipulation. Children and young adults can confuse sympathy and guilt with manipulation and with how people react to the situation in the end. Behavioral psychologists study behaviors demonstrated in others. They don't contradict what their client is feeling and help them understand it in the end.
So the study I chose to research was socio-emotional processing of morally laden behavior and their consequences on others in forensic psychopaths. So the main goal of the study is the researchers wanted to prove that psychopathic abnormalities in emotional processing is more complex than just a simple emotional deficit in an individual. So the study sampled 150 incarcerated men aged 15 to 54 and measured their levels of psychopathy using PCLR testing. And PCLR testing is the test designed to assess symptoms of psychopathy or antisocial habits based on forensic interviews and medical and jurisdictional records. So each subject was shown visual scenarios depicting either intentional harm or assistance to an individual, and each subject's brain responses were measured, and they were asked to evaluate the emotions of the protagonist in the given scenario. And these emotions they could choose from were sad, happy, fearful, angry, pain, and disgust. So from the results, the researchers discovered that individuals who do exhibit psychopathic traits do have much more of a complex issue than emotional deficit. They actually found that there is a cognitive distinction, and that these individuals with psychopathic traits cannot make a cognitive distinction between morally good and bad actions. And as well, emotion-related cues were influenced by the evaluation of others' mental states and their sensitivity to the nature of the other, which is like the victim versus perpetrator situation. And in my career of forensic psychology, I'm specifically interested in emotional abnormalities and antisocial behavior and psychopathic behavior. So the information from this study was very helpful to me because I think all forensic psychologists can better understand individuals with psychopathic traits and realize that it is much more than simply emotional deficit, that there is a cognitive issue. In order to make fair and accurate assessments in the courtroom, forensic psychologists should be able to understand the complex process of abnormal behavior and processing.
For my research, I chose the article Management of Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder in the Dental Settings, Concerns, Behavioral Approaches, and Recommendations. In the study, the main issue was the lack of insufficient knowledge and the lack of confidence in dental hygiene residents. The results of the study were conducted on 143 dental hygiene residents performing dental work on autistic children. Out of the 143 students, 86 felt confident using non-pharmaceuticals and 57 felt confident using pharmaceuticals such as anesthesia. Being in a situation where the dental hygienist must perform with precision, it is essential for them to be confident while administering drugs to the patient. In a dental setting, morality can be viewed as a negative factor when administering the wrong dosage, which results in malpractice. As a dental hygienist, it is a big responsibility to have good ethics as a professional in order to provide the patient with great oral health care. The final results were that the dental hygiene residents have insufficient knowledge in working with autistic children. The lack of special needs clinic programs makes it difficult to fully experience more hands-on and engage with autistic children. By creating clinics, it creates opportunities of growth in better understanding autistic children, and this gives them more confidence and reduces malpractice. Dental hygiene and moral development. As a career in dental hygiene, the top priority is to be well-rounded, working with all patients. This ensures the patient's safety and provides each individual with exceptional dental care. Although dental hygiene has its challenges with administering pharmaceuticals in children with autism, maintaining a positive attitude can lead to boosting confidence, allowing the dental hygienist to perform well under pressure. Learning more about dental hygiene and ways to better assist children with special needs is necessary. This will eliminate future malpractice and provide better dental care to children with autism and other disabilities.
I did my research on the conscience as a regulatory function and moral reasoning. The main point of the study was to determine the moral orientation in delinquent adolescents. In the study, they used a questionnaire with 59 delinquent and 275 non-delinquent juveniles. The results were that delinquents were less prone to experiencing shame and guilt, while more prone to experiencing pride. It showed that delinquents have a harder time picking between right and wrong and don't feel as shameful or guilty when they do something wrong. It also showed that juvenile delinquents have a lower stage of moral judgment compared to their non-delinquent counterparts. My career is forensic psychology, and I think this study provides forensic practitioners tools for assessing the state of the conscience. And in order to help others, forensic psychologists should be able to understand the conscience thinking of both non-delinquent and delinquent adolescents.
My study was social and moral within film. Film reflects society, in turn have an influence on society through changes in representation of moral challenges and the changing of viewers' attitudes. From thrillers to rom-coms, films is a part of everyday life and it has a big influence on today's culture. These social and informative films help us comprehend the world and have an impact on our intellectual process, encourages us to thrive to do our part to assist mankind, such as volunteering or contributing to charity. Films may raise awareness about the value of education, art, sports, and politics, as well as the risk of doing drugs, alcohol, and other legal activities. It also helps us learn more about different cultures and the horrors of homelessness. The countries that are always fighting wars and terrorism. Furthermore, movies provide us with the opportunity to let our imagination run wild. After seeing a film, we think about the characters and the story and attempt to expand it all as far as possible. Sometimes even wonder what the characters will be doing once the film is done. As a result, authors write fan fiction and artists create fan art, both of which are shared on social media sites. This might help in the development of a person's moral viewpoint in life.
And here we have a short video going more in depth on Kohlberg's moral theory development.
Moral reasoning.
My bad, I was muted.
Lawrence Kohlberg's theory claims that our development of moral reasoning happens in 6 stages. The stages themselves are structured in 3 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. To understand this better, imagine a conflict at school. There is a fight in the schoolyard. 2 ninth graders are beating up Tom. Those who watch the fight are at different stages of moral development. Let's see what they do and how they justify their behavior. At stage 1, we make moral judgments based on obedience and punishment. Finn's sense of good or bad is directly linked to whether he gets punished or not. Finn sees what is happening to his friend and wants to help, but he doesn't because he is afraid the teacher may punish him if he gets caught fighting. He asks himself, how can I avoid punishment? At stage 2, we are motivated by self-interest. Mary decides to intervene and help Tom. She knows that she might get punished, but she also knows that she could become a victim herself someday. If she helps Tom now, he might help her in the future. She is asking herself, what's in it for me? At stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity guide our moral judgment. Betty sees the fight and wants to intervene, but when she realizes that all the others are just watching, she decides not to get involved. She wants others to see that she is a good girl who is conforming with the ethics of the community. She asks herself, what do others think of me? At stage 4, we value authority and want to maintain social order. When the teacher sees the group fighting, he immediately steps in and shouts, "Stop! Fighting at school is forbidden." He feels that, above all, it is important to follow the rules, otherwise chaos breaks out. He feels it is his duty to uphold the rules that sustain a functioning society. He asks himself, how can I maintain law and order? At stage 5, we understand rules as a social contract, as opposed to a strict order. Jessie, who watches from afar, is not sure how she feels about this. To her, rules make sense only if they serve the right purpose. Obviously, the school rules prohibit fighting, but maybe Tom deserves to finally learn his lesson. Just yesterday, he punched a young girl from grade 1. She asks herself, does a rule truly serve all members of the community? At stage 6, we are guided by universal ethical principles. All those involved now have to face the headmaster. He first explains the school rules and why they exist. He then clarifies that rules are valid only if they are grounded in justice. The commitment to justice carries with it an obligation to disobey unjust rules. The headmaster's highest moral principle is compassion. He believes that all people should learn to understand each other's viewpoints and that they don't feel alone with their feelings. He asks, what are the abstract ethical principles that serve my understandings of justice? At the pre-conventional level, Finn is driven by fear and Mary by self-interest. Both judge what is right or wrong by the direct consequences they expect for themselves and not by social norms. This form of reasoning is common among children. At the conventional level, Betty responds to peer pressure, and the teacher follows the rules. Their morality is centered around what society regards as right. At this level, the fairness of rules is seldom questioned. It is common to think like this during adolescence and adulthood. At the post-conventional level, Jessie knows that things are complicated because individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own morality. The headmaster follows a universal ethical idea, at complete disconnect with what society thinks or the rules say. To him, everything is solved through compassion. The right behavior, in his opinion, is therefore never a means to an end, but always an end in itself. Not every person reaches this level. The American psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg based his work on Piaget's theory of cognitive development. In order to confirm his theory of stages of moral development, Kohlberg interviewed boys between the ages of 10 and 16. He analyzed how they would justify their decision when confronted with different hypothetical moral dilemmas. We will now present to you the most famous moral dilemma Kohlberg presented to his students. Let's see what you would do. The Heinz Dilemma. A woman was on her deathbed. There was only one drug that the doctors thought might save her. The druggist that made that particular medicine sold it for 10 times the price of the production costs. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, was poor and could not afford to buy the drug, not even with the financial help of his friends. Heinz then asked the pharmacist to sell it to him for half the price, but he refused. To save the life of his wife, Heinz broke into the man's laboratory and stole the medicine. Now tell us, should Heinz have stolen the drug? Would it change anything if Heinz didn't love his wife? What if the person dying was not his wife, but a stranger? Should the police arrest the druggist for murder if the wife had died? Please write your answers and their justifications in the comments below.
In conclusion, the information discovered by this group is very applicable to any individual's personal and professional life. To better understand oneself, it is important to have the tools to understand others. In addition, understanding the process of moral reasoning and decision-making in adolescence in particular can better prepare teachers, psychologists, medical professionals, etc., to encourage pro-social behavior and treat antisocial and emotional abnormal behavior.
Based on the research and the discussions that occurred in this group, one further consideration is that there should be much more research on the subject. There is an abundance of research on moral decision-making, but there are few studies that are actually conducted on adolescents. Furthermore, an increase in research would allow for greater understanding and treatment. Within this group, it was also difficult to find research because of our diverse selection of career paths. Perhaps a wide variety of career fields should incorporate psychology into their training.
And here is our bibliography. Thank you for watching.